For many years, people believed that the Enterprise's adventures were about bravery, friendship, and teamwork. Behind the well-executed performances, however, were many difficult moments where egos battled and tempers occasionally became so severe that the cast was broken. At the heart of the fun and the problem was William Shatner, who played Captain Kirk. As he gets older, he speaks candidly about those moments, revealing a reality that differs greatly from the heroic tales that captured the public's interest. A troubled life. On March 22, 1931, William Shatner was born in Montreal, Canada, amid a record-breaking snowstorm. His mother had to give birth at home because the roads were closed. From the beginning, his story was full with drama and surprise. It seemed as though fate was preparing him for a career in theater. At the age of 8, Shatner began attending a children's acting school directed by a well-known Canadian actor. At the age of 10, he was already earning a career as an actor by appearing in radio programs such as The Magic Flute for CBC. He soon received recognition for his portrayal of Tom Sawyer in a local play. His command of the stage astounded the critics. Shatner had a difficult time in school, despite his early talent. To please his parents, he enrolled in McGill University's economics program in 1948, but he never felt like he belonged there. Years later, he acknowledged that he preferred the campus theater to class and rarely attended. He wrote and performed in a student play by 1950 that was well received by many. Producers at CBC took notice of him as a result. His first TV appearance was a preview of his upcoming film work. In 1956, Shatner took the greatest gamble of his life. In an attempt to pursue acting full-time, he moved to New York City. Tamburlaine the Great had his Broadway debut. However, it was only performed 20 times. Despite the show's failure, the experience was valuable. In New York, a young Canadian without any training took the stage. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, Shatner then began to establish himself on American television. He appeared in television series such as The Outer Limits, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and The Defenders. However, his 2 appearances on The Twilight Zone, particularly the 1963 episode Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, demonstrated his ability to portray characters who were unraveling under pressure. His most well-known role as Captain Kirk would later heavily feature his ability to convey tension and barely restrain panic. William Shatner was working steadily on television by 1965, but there were no indications that he would soon be cast in the role that would alter his life. By then, Star Trek already had a commander, Jeffrey Hunter as Christopher Pike in The Cage, the first pilot. NBC executives, however, rejected it because they felt the program was too cerebral and slow. Rather than dismissing the concept, they took an odd action. They sent a second pilot. According to reports, Hunter chose not to return in order to concentrate on his films, but Shatner subsequently stated that there might have been more serious conflicts at play. Producers turned to Shatner as soon as the part became available. He believed the performances were too stiff, but he appreciated how well-made the rejected pilot was. He believed that the captain should be more gregarious and entertaining. Shatner assumed the role of James T. in 1966. Kirk reinterpreted the role as one that was amiable and powerful. He wanted Kirk to be curious and eager to explore the unknown, but yet relaxed enough to crack jokes with his teammates. Kirk didn't need to give the helmsman commands. Leaning forward, he could say, "Take us left, George." He appeared comfortable, which set him apart from the typical military figures on television at the time. Shatner drew inspiration for Kirk's disposition from 2 places. One was the courageous and intelligent military hero Horatio Hornblower. The other was Alexander the Great. In 1963, Shatner had portrayed this role in a failed television pilot. He added charm and strength to Kirk Alexander's. Even softer was the ha-ha humor that Shatner insisted on including. Unlike many heroes of science fiction, Kirk was not merely a cold planner. People knew they could joke with him and trust him. It was a wise wager. As soon as Star Trek premiered in September 1966, Kirk shot to fame. People may identify with the figure's persistent confidence and bravery during a difficult decade. Behind the scenes, things were not going well, despite the show's large following of devoted viewers. Taking command meant more to Shatner than simply leading the Enterprise's fictional crew. It also required handling real-life rivalries that might have caused the organization to break up. Feuds, fights, and malicious schemes. While teamwork was evident on television, Star Trek's backstage operations were frequently chaotic. Tension that occasionally erupted into open conflict was brought on by William Shatner's need for attention, his ambition for achievement, and his frequent rewrites. At the time, fans were unaware that the bonds depicted on TV were stretched by jealousy and rage just a few feet away from the cameras. There was an early climax during the filming of The Man Trap in September 1966. Leonard Nimoy's portrayal of Spock was unexpectedly gaining popularity, which caused him to clash with William Shatner. 17 times, Shatner deliberately went into Nimoy's shots because he believed Nimoy was detracting from his attention. This resulted in costly retakes. The director was furious, and Nimoy threatened to quit the set if it continued. It was among the first indications that the Unity cover was phony. Small disputes weren't the only reason for conflicts. While filming The Paradise Syndrome in March 1968, Shatner and Nimoy got into a furious argument about how to depict Captain Kirk's forgetfulness. Shatner desired drama and vigor, while Nimoy advocated for sensitivity. Hours passed during the standoff before Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry intervened to calm the two guys down. Both authors and readers were angry. For The Trouble with Tribbles in 1967, Shatner and Nimoy rewrote speeches for 14 hours in a row. To create space for their own lines, they cut those of other characters. Cast members were half-jokingly referring to the program as the Shatner-Nimoy Show by the third season. Even the show's most significant moments were tense. In the 1968 film Plato's Stepchildren, Michelle Nichols' character Uhura and Shatner's character Kirk shared a kiss. At the time, this was significant for American television. According to reports, Shatner requested an alternative version, sans the kiss out of concern about the audience's reaction. However, Nichols believed the moment was crucial and collaborated with Shatner to sabotage any take that did not include a kiss. As a result, the studio broadcast the momentous occasion. In addition to the creative conflicts, the difficult schedule exacerbated the situation. The cast and crew were extremely exhausted because episodes were occasionally filmed for 16 to 22 hours. After working on the Tholian web for 18 hours, Shatner himself collapsed on the set in October 1968. Out of rage, he flung his screenplay and refused to continue until he was granted a break. The price at home. Leading the Enterprise's bridge, William Shatner was confident, but his personal life was unraveling. His connections with other players and his physique were harmed by the lengthy hours he spent working on set. They treated his family badly. Beginning in 1956, Shatner's first marriage to Canadian actress Gloria Rand was a happy one. Leslie, Elizabeth, and Melanie were born in 1958, 1961, and 1964, respectively. Together, they had 3 kids. However, Star Trek had made it difficult for him to marry or have children by the late 1960s. The production schedule was extremely rigorous. Shatner would leave the house before the sun came up to apply makeup, and he would frequently return long after midnight. Later, he claimed that from 1966 to 1969, he did not attend 217 family meals. On Christmas Day in 1967, the majority of families were gathered around presents and trees. However, he was filming additional scenes for the Gamesters of Triskelion on the set. He was too busy revising with Leonard Nimoy to attend his daughter Elizabeth's school play on April 12, 1968. His absence became the rule rather than the exception. With every goal that was missed, Gloria's rage was getting worse. His birthdays passed without his presence. There was no recognition of holidays, and even basic weekends could no longer be spent together. In a 2018 interview, Shatner acknowledged that the guilt from those years still has a significant impact on him. Only a few weeks after Star Trek was canceled, in June 1969, Olivia filed for divorce. She claimed that because he was emotionally distant and never present, it felt like she was raising their children alone. It was not a good moment. At the same time that his business failed, his family disintegrated. For a part that would no longer occur, Shatner had sacrificed his family life. Rather than returning to a secure home to feel secure, he discovered 3 daughters living in an empty Beverly Hills home with their mother. Even though he remained close to his children as an adult, the 47 wasted weekends served as bitter reminders of what fame cost him. He frequently failed in his attempts to re-establish a relationship with his children. This man was perceived as a strong and capable leader, but in reality, he was losing the most significant aspects of his life as a husband and parent. And the actual struggle for survival had really just started when the cameras stopped rolling, from homelessness to rehabilitation. When Star Trek ended in 1969 after just 3 seasons, William Shatner's life fell apart almost immediately. There weren't many fans of the show, but they persisted. However, it was insufficient to sustain it. Shatner experienced an issue that many celebrities have experienced after it was canceled: forms of casting. He was no longer regarded as a multifaceted artist. He was solely known to casting directors as Captain Kirk. In the early 1970s, jobs were scarce. This guy was once heralded as the future Marlon Brando. He was now forced to play any role he could, generally in garbage or low-budget horror films like Kingdom of the Spiders, The Devil's Reign, and Big Bad Mama. These parts did not advance his career. The rent was barely covered. Because his girls were living in Beverly Hills with Gloria, Shatner was struggling to make ends meet. At one point, he was so impoverished that he pitched a tent in the San Fernando Valley and lived there. He later referred to this time as just that period, as it was too difficult to discuss in depth. He would attend small gatherings or parties to earn money. Because he couldn't afford new stuff, he would even package up old items like his Star Trek phaser and give them to his children as Christmas presents. For many years following those years, he felt ashamed of himself. Everything changed in 1977 with the release of Star Wars in theaters. Paramount recognized that it needed to revitalize its own space product. Star Trek, the motion picture, was one of the priciest films ever produced, with a production budget of $35 million by 1979. At the age of 48, Shatner returned as Captain Kirk. Strict dieting had helped him shed 25 pounds, and he was desperate to regain his career. The film earned $139 million worldwide. Although it wasn't a big smash, it was sufficient to demonstrate the series' continued viability. Things were genuinely put right with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan in 1982. The stories had to be deeper because of the reduced budget, and Shatner's now older and more sensitive Kirk resonated deeply. The man who had been homeless a few years prior was back in control of a major cultural event after receiving positive reviews for his performance. Imaginations, Grief, and Fortitude, the Star Trek films, and a new TV role in T.J. Hooker helped William Shatner regain his reputation by the mid-1980s. He was again in command as Sergeant Thomas Jefferson Hooker, but this time he was in control of people on the streets, rather than in space. Viewers responded warmly to the show, which demonstrated Shatner's versatility. He worked out hard and frequently performed his own movements when he wasn't on camera. The physical hurdles led to concussions, broken ribs, and the beginning of chronic back problems that would follow him into old age. But as he went on, Star Trek was his shadow and his rescue. The rage of the cast never truly subsided. Others, including as James Doohan and George Takei, have discussed William Shatner's tendency toward bossiness. The animosity between Shatner and Leonard Nimoy remained strong, despite Shatner's admission that insecurity was a factor in some of his decisions. They collaborated, quarreled, and occasionally ceased communicating entirely. By the time Nimoy passed away in 2015, they had lost contact. This loss, according to Shatner, was among the worst things that had ever occurred to him. Following that, he gained a fresh reputation outside of science fiction thanks to his success on Boston Legal from 2004 to 2008. His portrayal of Denny Crane, which combined humor and melancholy, earned him 2 Emmys. But by then, it was obvious that he was physically exhausted from his work. He suffered from severe arthritis, chronic back pain, and hearing loss as a result of years of working on noisy sets. In interviews, he stated that the fear of loneliness, more than the actual agony, was what tormented him the most. Shatner, now in his 90s, has been candid about the true events that took place on the Star Trek set. He admits to the lies, altercations, and ego conflicts, claiming that they were brought on by his own need to remain visible. His statement, "I failed sometimes," was direct. But I was always trying to keep the show alive. Behind the cameras, the courageous Captain Kirk, who once embodied the best in people, was a man attempting to strike a balance between his fear, his desire, and the debilitating demands of celebrity. Finally, this complexity, the broken person off-screen and the hero on-screen, has been demonstrated. Even movie stars have wounds, as demonstrated by William Shatner's path. The brave guy who led others could experience fear, jealousy, and sadness. The man behind the uniform, who paid a high price for the role that made him famous, is now visible to fans in addition to Captain Kirk. His age is 93. Did William Shatner's drive truly make him the antagonist on the Star Trek set? Or do you think his co-stars were too hard on him? For more untold tales about the hardships of Hollywood celebrities, like and subscribe. Post your thoughts in the comments section.